Thank you very much for coming, everybody. In case you don't know this yet, my name is Hannah Poole, and I'm a journalist and curator of the talks and debates here at the Southbank Centre's Women of the World Festival. And I'm so excited about this next session for lots of reasons. And one of the reasons is that we have a really great keynote to kick us off. I'm a bit of a kind of super fan of Shirley Tate. And I've been trying to get her to do a keynote here for years. And finally, it's happening, which is great. So I'm going to introduce Shirley in a second. Then we're going to have her keynote. Then we're going to have. Then I'm going to introduce you to the rest of the panelists. Then we'll have a little conversation amongst us as a panel. But the majority of the session will be audience Q&A. So there'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions of the panels, to make comments, and to interact in general. So yeah, get your questions ready. But first of all, one of my sheroes is Dr. Shirley Tate. She's Associate Professor in Race and Culture and Director of the Centre for Ethnicity and Racism Studies in the School of Sociology and Social Policy at Leeds University. Unfortunately, she wasn't there when I was applying for university, otherwise that's where I'd have gone. So please make Shirley Tate incredibly welcome. Thank you.
As always, it's absolutely great to be here at WOW. I'm always overwhelmed by the numbers of people that come to the sessions that Hannah organises, probably because they're really, really good sessions. Anna asked me to speak for 7-10 minutes maximum, and I'm going to try and keep within that time because, you know, you can ask me questions or ask us questions as well anyway. So I'll begin. From the beginning of European exploration in Africa, African women's bodies were seen in negative and positive ways. They were seen as desirable, but as repulsive as well. They were seen as available, sexually available that is, as untouchable. They were seen as productive bodies in terms of laboring bodies. They were also seen as reproductive in terms of having children, but also for use for sex. The image of the long-breasted woman was the first one with which African women were kind of stereotyped. And at that time, the long-breasted woman was taken straight out of medieval Europe and taken to Africa by European explorers. And the long-breasted woman in medieval times, they were seen as like witches, sorcerers, that kind of thing. So immediately, black women were seen as that. In the 18th century, there was then a fascination with black women's bottoms, and we see that being extended into the exhibition of Sarah Baartman. She's one of the most famous figures in terms of black women's bodies in this part of the world. And her bottom was about saying that black women were sexually abnormal and they were also racially othered. And if that was extended to her genitalia, which were also seen as abnormal, then it was also about the hypersexualization of black women. But much before Sarah Baartman in the Caribbean, there was also the production of another black Venus, and that was the sable saffron Venus on Caribbean plantations. And this predates Baartman by about a century or so, I would say. So the sable saffron Venus from the Caribbean was also part of the emergence of Sarah Baartman, I think, in the European context. So who was this sable saffron Venus? She was basically sable, a darker-skinned black woman, and saffron, the mixed-race child of this woman. And these women were seen as hot in terms of sexuality, available again. Also, they were seen as market women. They were seen as seducers of white men. They were used as concubines. They were also used as breeders. So we have this history within the European context of what Patricia Hill Collins talks about in the US context of controlling images of black women being established through European colonization and enslavement, also exploration as well. And in the US, Hill Collins and Bell Hooks talk about the Sapphire, the Jezebel, the Mammy, the Tragic Mulatto, and the Aunt Jemima that came out of US enslavement. And in the 20th century, we still have images in the UK, for example, of black women as welfare-dependent lone parents, strong black woman, big black mama. And what interests me about the ways in which images of black women move is that they kind of circulate around the black Atlantic diaspora. So in any country in which there has been African enslavement, you have shared ideas on black women's bodies, shared societal ideas of black women's bodies in terms of, for example, skin color, size, muscularity, and shape. And these societal ideas, since they come out of whiteness, because they ignore what we think about our own bodies, of course, since these societal ideas come out of whiteness, they're still kind of based on the ideal femininity of frail whiteness, which black women can never be seen to inhabit, of course. So during enslavement, African descent women were seen as having bodies that were made for production. So they were laborers in the field, but also reproduction, as I said before. They provided sexual services. They were also child bearers and child rearers. They provided domestic and care work, and that also included wet nursing for white children. One of the things that never ceases to interest me as well in terms of representations of black women is that when we think of black women in the UK, not us, I mean society in general, you can just check this by looking in any woman's magazine that you'd like to look at, apart from clearly black women's magazines, but even there, you'll see what I mean. When we think of black women in the UK, we invariably think of African American women. We also invariably think of transgressive femininities, and we also think of marginalized bodies. And we think those things because these have been the most globalized kind of views of black women created in popular culture. So of course, everyone in the world who has a TV and who's interested in pop music, in hip hop, knows Beyonce Knowles. Anyone interested in sport and tennis knows Serena Williams, and everyone in the world who has a TV set will know Michelle Obama, right? But we also have Caribbean women who are also global, I think. Nicki Minaj, I think, is global. Is she global? I'd say she's pretty global. She, at one point, had, was it 6 million or 12 million Twitter fans, right? Something like that. She's pretty global. Grace Jones, Jamaican. Nicki Minaj is Trinidadian. Grace Jones, Jamaican, pretty global too. Rihanna from Barbados, also pretty global. And in the UK, we have, also global, Naomi Campbell, Jessica Ennis, made global by the Olympics, and Tandy Newton, made global as an actress, but also through Olay, right? So we also have black women in the UK, but we kind of tend to forget that they're there, which I find kind of really interesting. Within the UK, though, black women's bodies are invisible spectacles, also within the US, Europe, and the Caribbean. Though, as I said before, there is the iconic black American woman's body in the UK. And this iconic black American woman's body has come to represent black women here in the UK and within wider European culture. And somebody whose body has gained a lot of significance across Europe because of the TV series is what you call Kerry Washington, Scandal, right? So, like, you can go to Germany and see her on a billboard in the train station, for example, just as you can in France. Am I right about France, by the way? Anyone been there recently? Yeah. So we can say that the black American woman is iconic, even though in the UK we've had and still do have public black British women. For example, we've had aristocrats, Elizabeth Dido Elizabeth Bell, I should say, remember from the movie Belle? Yeah, also Lindsay in brackets. We also have Lady Bath. She got married to Lord Bath last year or the year before. We've had models and still do have models, Jordan Dunn, Alec Weck, Naomi Campbell, singers Jamelia, Beverly Knight, MBE, Alexandra Burke, who is now in the stage version of Bodyguard. I saw that advertised in Manchester when I was there yesterday. Talk show host Trisha Goddard, who's also been on Loose Women recently, hasn't she, right? We have politician Diane Abbott, MP, athletes Denise Lewis, OBE, Dame Kelly Holmes, writer Jackie Kay, MBE, and members of the House of Lords, Baroness Patricia Scotland of Astle, Baroness Valerie Amos, Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon, OB, Doreen Lawrence. Baroness Una King of Bow. And the reason why I think it's really important for us to remember our British black women's bodies, along with, of course, the women who are popular cultural icons, is that these women really rupture the idea of the Hottentot Venus or the Black Venus or the sable saffron Venus stereotypes that exist about black women as the hypersexual, the breeder, the lone welfare parent, that kind of thing. But what these images of black women tell us is that white power to define black women is still very pervasive. But black women have always positioned themselves in opposition to this stereotype, and black women continue to do that within popular culture, even though black feminists like bell hooks kind of revile women like Beyonce, and also black nationalists do the same for exposing too much skin and being somebody who's really talented but using the booty and the breast to get what she wants. I would say that we need to look at how it is that women use their bodies in very agentic ways, I would call it, ways that say that they're not kind of cultural dupes. And one of the people who's helped me to think about that is a woman called Shane Lee. She's an African-American writer, and she talks about third wave power punani, black feminism, and I really like that, because what it means is that the body is used, not as something that's necessarily usable, if you know what I mean, by men or by society, but it's used for the benefit of the woman herself, and it's also a zone of feminist practice, because women resist the black respectability that we're supposed to have, that comes out of black nationalism, but also post-slavery black women had to be respectable because they were the bearers of the race and the mothers of the nation kind of thing. So black women resist that version of black respectability. And they also resist the idea of white hypersexuality, the hypersexuality that comes out of white images of black women that have been with us since European exploration and certainly since colonialism and slavery. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. That's some really great framing there. Thank you very much, Shirley. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the rest of the panel. Sitting next to Shirley, we have award-winning blogger and writer and activist Feminista Jones. At the far end on the right of the panel, we have artist and thinker Rachael Young. And then next to me, we have journalist and... Thinker, blogger, journalist extraordinaire, Kieran Yates. So actually, Feminista, I'm going to start with you because of where Shirley sort of ended her talk. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the writing and work that you've been doing in this area?
I do a lot of writing to represent black women in sexuality, and I see our owning our sexuality as a function of empowerment. I mean, and as Dr. Tate, I mean, I was just so in there. I'm sorry, Shirley. Oh my gosh, you're so amazing. I'm like listening, like, yeah. Because we talk about this stuff all the time, and it's like, oh my God, okay. I wrote a piece for Ebony after 12 Years a Slave came out, and I don't know if anybody remembers the opening scene in which the enslaved woman was asking Solomon to basically help her bring her to orgasm, because we would assume that her body had probably been used so much that she wanted to have a moment where she could achieve this kind of sexual pleasure on her own and on her own terms. And she invited, she asked, they almost pled with her eyes, if you look at her eyes, asked Solomon to come in and to help her do that. And so in that moment, to be able to achieve orgasm on her own terms was a reclamation of her body. And I think that a lot of what we experience, particularly as black women, is this idea that our bodies are not our own, and that to enjoy sex and to embrace sex and to discuss it openly is kind of really an act of resistance against what the world expects of us, as our bodies. We were laborers, we were producers of the labor force. So a lot of the stuff that I write about is really kind of on the other end of that. It is, you can talk about this, you can love sex, you can enjoy sex, you can love alternative manifestations of sex. It doesn't have to be in this one way. If you are religious, if you're not religious, if you are following along with what feels good with you, and you are consenting and it is legal, and we'll question legality on a lot of things too, because we've got sex workers who, deserve some rights. But if you are engaging in something that feels good and right to you, then it's empowering and it cannot be wrong. And you have the right as a Black woman to do that. So I write a lot about that and try to represent Black women in those ways.
Great, thank you. Kieran.
So I am a journalist who's been writing about sort of minority issues for the last 6-7 years, sort of across lots of mainstream media, broadsheets like The Guardian and Independent, and sort of lots of music and trend magazines, talking about urban culture as a sphere of influence. And I think that one of the conversations that I have with a lot of my peers, sort of within that building and outside as a freelancer, is the importance of plurality. And I think that that's something which we're obviously going to discuss a lot today. But I think just moving on from what Shirley was talking about was the importance of moving away from the idea that there is one kind of Black female experience. Mm-hmm. And when you're within institutions where you feel like you're a minority, even though, there is a lot of debate at the moment about rejecting that term because, there are countless brown women across the earth and there's only specific spaces that we are actually minorities, but these are the spaces where we're not represented in the best way. And I feel like the idea that we have lots of amazing commenters, bloggers, artists, people who are sending the right message, but then when you're inside lots of institutions, these aren't the women who are making structural change. These aren't the women in positions of power who are changing and repositioning the way that women of colour are represented. So I think that some of the conversations that I would like to bring today, and which have come across my writing, is how important that is, and why I think that commenters and people writing around these issues are just the first step. And what we need to be pushing is for that internal change, those internal movements. And I would like to bring up that conversation around today.
That's great, thank you very much. Okay, Rachel.
So I'm an artist. I mostly make performance, but sometimes I work in sound as well. My work usually starts out as me as being the subject. Often, and more so recently, I've been thinking about how that feels intimidating or inhibiting, to me, because I see the freeness that some of my white counterparts have when they create work. And one thing that's really kind of in my mind at the moment is that I always feel like when approaching work, I have to think about my Blackness. It's there, but it always feels like, sometimes I feel like, do I have to reject it? There's work that I want to make that I feel that is important to me and should be seen by people, but I know that the majority of audiences, especially white audiences for artworks, are white, and so there's always a battle between the work that I want to make and the work that I feel the work that I feel will get bums on seat, because inevitably, unless I can pull in an audience, I can't make work. I guess the other thing that is really important to me is that I'm from Nottingham, you can probably hear from my accent, and a really strong thing for me is invisibility, and that me and my female friends in Nottingham, we all always feel invisible. And recently, I'm sure you've all seen Strolling, right? So I was watching that the other day, and she was in Paris, and she was talking to some Black women there, young women there, and they were talking about invisibility, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Like, it's not just me, it's not just us that feel that way. Invisible because Nottingham is multicultural, but it is very white, and I do not, or none of my friends, we do not conform to like white ideals of beauty. And I guess these are some of the things that are kind of like floating around in my head at the moment as questions, and I want to know. And I guess my thing is kind of like, is it? And I know it's not just a northern thing. I'd like to talk about. I'd like to address this. Yeah.
I was really keen actually to not have this be a kind of all London moment, this panel.
Yeah.
I, from the age of 7 until 18, I was in Manchester, And again, I have to say, I did run to London as quick as I could, but it's very, very different.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to have those conversations. Actually, often we can sit in London and have them, but actually, if you go elsewhere, and actually, I was just saying to Shirley, tell everybody where you live.
Huddersfield.
So again,
oh my
we've got
God, no.
So we're now like, see,
God,
now you're like, wow,
Oh, no.
you've got loads of black people.
I had to live in Huddersfield for like 3 months. I hated it. How did you do that? I felt so black and so like.
But see, that's the best part, when you get to feel super black.
That's
No, not even in a.
Like, you just wake
it
up
was
every morning
really,
like this.
but in a really.
But that's Yorkshire. I mean, Yorkshire's a very white place. So
Yeah.
it's like Feminista says you kind of wake up every morning like that.
It's true. It's true.
Your black soap and your fried chicken just.
Feminista, I know this is your first time to Europe.
Yes.
Yay! And
And I don't want to go back.
I was saying I felt guilty yesterday because it was so sunny she would get the wrong impression. But anyway, it's fine now. You've been here for, all of 2 days.
Yeah.
Have you noticed anything different walking around as a black woman in London compared to walking around in the States?
Oh, you know what I noticed? White men like us here. Like, I don't know if it's just me because I came here, but I've seen so many couples of black women and white men. I was just like, what? Like, what the hell is going on here? In America, you don't see a whole lot of that. I don't know if it's different here, but I just noticed that. But the street harassment is the same. I had experiences with that. I was with a group and by myself. I had experiences with that. I noticed that people just look at me kind of weird. I don't know if it's because I'm tall or stand out or got a big butt. I don't know. But maybe I was smiling. I don't know.
Yeah, smiling might mark you out as different.
No, and I was saying hello, and people were like, "What? Why is she speaking to me?" But I went out yesterday, went to Brixton, and I was with some folks, and we were just having conversations about movements and like the Brixton riots and things like that, and just kind of listening and talking about the lack of political power that folks have here. And then she was talking about America as being a model almost for the strides that black Americans have made. And I'm like, what? Like, honestly, woke up in the middle of the night nervous about going back because yet another young man, unarmed man, was shot by police the other night. They're commemorating Selma 50, Bloody Sunday, when the police basically beat and killed black people who wanted to walk through their own city. So it's been 50 years since that. And seeing the images of like President Obama walking next to people, women that are in wheelchairs who I know were probably beaten that Sunday, it was just very triggering to me. And I was like, I have to go back to this. And then just kind of knowing like all the work that we do with street harassment and sexual violence and things like that, just in my black body, the way that it is, I'm a big woman, and that's a lot of things we don't talk about, like being a bigger woman or a larger woman, it's nerve-wracking, and I haven't felt that as much here. I will say, walking down the streets, I haven't felt as nervous walking, but I understand that you guys have had issues too.
We will come to them, don't worry. Shirley, do you want to just say one of the things that I thought was really interesting in your presentation when you were talking about not just the invisibility, but that there are certain kinds of black women who are sort of allowed to exist, and then others, so yes, it can often feel like the rest of the world assumes there are no black women in this country. Yeah. It can often feel like the rest of the world assumes that the only kind of black woman is very, very light-skinned, seems to have long blonde hair, and so on. And how is that? Is that changing?
No.
Yeah. No. Why is it not changing?
I don't think it's changing at all. What I find quite interesting about the image of the light-skinned black woman with the blonde hair like Jessica Ennis is how that has become like the global representation of what black women are supposed to be. But it's not actually a new image either. Right. It comes straight out of a very specific history of the kind of emergence of the iconicity of the lighter skinned black woman as the beautiful that we saw in enslavement societies, and that cuts across the Caribbean, and the US as well. So, and I don't see that diminishing anytime soon either, even though within black communities that is not the case at all necessarily, that this is the iconic image. If you think about who has control of like the media, who can circulate images most effectively, and if you think about the images that are taken up into representation as well, it gives us a clue about what is happening in terms of who gets to represent black people and why. Like, for example, I was talking to I was talking to you, wasn't I, before, about Jessica Ennis, right? Great athlete. That's not my point. She's a great athlete. But why is it, do you think, that she became the global icon of Great Britain rather than a darker-skinned black woman? Why do you think that is? Why? It sets up the UK internationally as somewhere that's multicultural, anti-racist, tolerant. So that serves a national purpose for Great Britain as a global brand, right? If you also look at how she's come to represent other brands, like Olay, for example, right? Banco Santander, she's still doing those ads, running across the moors near Sheffield. Jaguar, British Airways. You'll also see that there's something about those brands positioning themselves in a very global way as people who accept blackness. But of course, it's a specific kind of blackness. It's one that's always been more palatable to whiteness. As you were saying before, white people are the consumers in this country, aren't they, right? So if you want to appeal to white people, you have to have a body in place representing your brand that has kind of the possibility of extension to the white body. And of course, if you are a black woman who is not mixed at all, you don't extend to white bodies, do you? You don't. You simply don't. If you're mixed, you do.
I want a question, because coming from outside, that's not what I think of when I think of a black woman in Britain. I think of you, and we think of immigrants. People as black British, and we think of Caribbean and the Jamaicans that came over here, and we think of the African, for people from African nations that are coming there. So that's what I think. So when you're talking about the light skin ideal here, this is new for me. It's eye-opening for me. I didn't realize that was something that was being. I don't even know who you're speaking of. Honestly,
okay.
I don't know. I don't know, but I will. But I'm just as a point from an outsider, it's kind of like that's really interesting that the light skin thing is here, because when we talk about Black Britain,
does everybody know what shadeism is? Does anyone need it? Okay, do you want to just break who wants to break down shadeism?
Colorism?
Yeah, shadism, colorism.
Yeah. I mean, it's
just for those who don't know.
I mean, we have an issue in the United States. I don't know if it's here. Is that we're punished for not being white. Like our men especially punish us black women for not being white women. And so the CDC just did a report on our teenagers and found that black female teenagers are 80% more likely to be beaten on purpose by their boyfriends than white girls. There is this culture of you are not good enough. And because we are stuck with you, because these white women don't want us, then we will punish you for that. And that's why our domestic violence rates are higher, our sexual assault rates are higher, all of these things, these inflictions, our street harassment is worse, is because we're punished for not being white women. So I mean, I don't know if that's across the board in other countries, but that's something that is very, very, that we're battling right now. And so the lighter skinned women are prized, and the closer you are to whiteness, and that's everywhere, the closer you are to whiteness, the more you're prized. But it's like a violent thing within the American black community. And so we have a situation where black men are more than twice as likely to have white spouses than black women. We have all these kinds of things going on in which black women, black American women, are being raised basically from birth to not be worth. And we have 2 studies that found within the last 5 years that up to 60% of black girls are sexually assaulted before they turn 18. This is coming from within our family. Over 90% of the perpetrators are people that they know. Fathers, brothers, uncles, cousins, friends in the neighborhood. They're sexually assaulting little girls. So there's something there that is centuries old, that our own men are punishing us for not being white.
So then what is the link between those horrific statistics and those day-to-day lives and what we see in popular culture? So is there a link between that and then I was trying to write down the name, Shane Lee, was it you were saying?
Yeah, Shane Lee.
Shane Lee. And what was the theory?
Well, she wrote this really great book, I think, called Erotic Revolutionaries, and she was talking about third wave black feminism and how important it is for us to see that black women, who we think of as naked, maybe, depending on our positioning, aren't naked. They're using their bodies to get, employment, also to become famous,
So those
and
stereotypes.
she called it third wave power punani feminism. And you know what punani is, of course.
Okay.
You know,
so,
right?
so Kieran, there are, of course, there are also other damaging stereotypes and other social mores that certain black women are supposed to be living up to. Can you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, which I think links quite well to the point that you just raised now about the link between those horrifying statistics and the role that pop culture plays in that. And to me, it's really clear. It's the idea that us as a society have a responsibility to those who are most vulnerable. And, you know, looking at those statistics, the most vulnerable people that come out of that are young black women. These also, you know, of course, this is also, you know, working class women, single mums across the board. But more often than not, those people who are sort of open to, you know, street harassment, domestic abuse, are vulnerable because they're not supported and feel voiceless around popular culture and the media. So to me, the link is very clear. If you feel like you don't have power in the media, if you feel like you don't have power or ownership over your own body because your body is being repositioned and written about people who haven't had first-hand experience of that, of course you're going to feel voiceless, because that is one thing that we should have ownership over. And if that story is being taken out of your hands and being sold back to you in a way that doesn't apply to you or it doesn't reflect your first-hand experience, of course you're going to feel detached and distanced. Last September, when Vogue ran their headline, "This is officially the era of the big booty."
Oh God.
You know, this, you know, this moment for them that was, you know, this idea that black women are supposed to feel grateful that you're being represented, you're being celebrated by white media, this is your time, this is great for you. And it wasn't, and it, you know, the sort of, you know, the obvious criticism that was coming, you know, from, you know, bloggers, people online, you know, there was a real disconnect between the people who were inside those buildings like Vogue, who couldn't understand why there was a problem there. They couldn't understand why black women weren't grateful for the fact that they were championing this new era. And I was just making a joke with Hannah before, like, oh, you're wearing braids, you're so on trend because, you know.
Apparently, Vogue have just said braids are on trend.
Yeah,
which
you
is
know.
great, apart from no black women read Vogue because we're never in it. So we'll never know, but there you go.
You know, in the last few weeks, we've seen, you know, braid pop-up shops across London, you know, and that's, you know, giving you sort of, you know, paying double to go and get, you know, box braids and all this kind of thing. And, you know, I think that is the issue. The reason that we have these tropes that we keep coming back to of angry Azealia Banks, of, you know, Whoopi Goldberg challenging Rosie O'Donnell and her being an angry black woman, of, you know, Zendaya being criticised for having dreadlocks that smell like weed and patchouli and being annoyed by that. The reason that we have that is because it's very new and there's a real need for us to have plurality in the way that we're talking about identity. And for as long as we don't have that, is for as long as these tropes will continue to exist and as long as those women will continue to feel vulnerable and voiceless.
Rachel, when you're putting yourself in your art, do you worry that those who are consuming your art, who for the most part will be white, are consuming in the wrong way? So they're getting pleasure when you're rather than critiquing themselves.
Do I think that? I don't know. No, not necessarily. I don't always feel that they understand where I'm coming from. Sometimes I think I skirt around the issues too much to make things palatable for people.
Right.
Yeah, and again, I went to watch. I watch a lot of work. There's always naked people. There's always naked white folk rolling around naked. There's always naked white folk. And, you know, and I think to myself, I can't do that. I can't take... One, I wouldn't want to display my body in that way because I don't want it to be a fetish. I wouldn't want that. Two, I could never look my parents in the eyes again if I did that. Because I'm supposed to behave in a certain way. I'm not supposed to talk about sex.
So this is the respectability that you're talking about.
I'm not supposed to talk about. There's lots of things that I like to do that I cannot talk about. I feel inhibited all the time. I want, like this, you know, this year I'm totally like, okay, so people are going to have to deal with stuff. People are going to have to deal. My dad's just going to have to deal with it. He is. Because I stop myself doing the things that I want to do.
Right.
Because I would hate I would hate for, I don't know, I'd hate for there to be repercussions, but actually I'm, yeah.
So this goes to something we were talking about in the last, about whether we're policing our own bodies.
Yeah.
Feminista Jones, you're very, you talk a lot about your body. You talk a lot about sexuality. But what was the tipping point from when you didn't to when you did? What changed in you?
I always did. So it's really funny because like when I was like 12, 13, my friends were just, why do you talk about sex so much? I was reading these romance novels like one a day, just every day, just like flipping through looking for the sex scenes. Like, what's going on here? You know, I don't know whether maybe it's the Aries in me. We are the nymphomaniacs of the zodiac signs. I don't know.
Is that right?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So I don't know if that was it, but I mean, I was raised by a very liberal mother who encouraged this kind of conversation and talk from an early age. So for me, it was never like a flipping point. What was really interesting is that I have a book about kink and BDSM, and I gave it to my dad, and he's like, oh, you don't have a problem with me reading? I was like, Dad, read whatever, I don't care, this is my book. I'm your daughter, you know, I'm almost 36 years old, you can read my book. And he read it, and he was just like, you know, this is really great, but do you do that thing with the pillow? Because that seems really weird, like, why would you want to be choked with a pillow? Like, you can't breathe, and how do you feel sexy when you can't breathe? And I had to explain to my dad what erotic asphyxiation was, and I'm having this conversation with my very old school military father about why some women like to have their breath cut off. So, but it was important to me because this is my work and this is who I am. And I've got, you know, these articles on Ebony, and I was like, Dad, read this. I'm talking about, you know, threesomes and the rules. And he's like, I don't want to read that. But I leave it up to him to make his choice. Yeah. And he will read that stuff. And so I just have to just do this. I have to do this, and the cards will fall where they may. Someone asked me, how would you feel about your son or his friends discovering your writing when they get older? I said, my shit is dope as hell. I would be happy if they found it, and I would be proud if my son read nothing I have done. I would not feel proud showing my son. Mm-hmm. And that's important to me, because if I can't do that, then it's not authentic and it's not real for me. I just can't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we're going to go to the audience now, actually. So if you have a question, please just put your hands up, and if you could wait for the microphone to get to you, that would be great. Thank you very much. Yes, in the cardigan. Thanks.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the connection between the portrayal of black women in the media and statistics in terms of violence and that sort of horrible thing, because I can understand it in relation to what you were saying about how black men are twice as likely to have a white spouse than a black spouse.
Yes.
Because
no, that wasn't what I was saying. I was saying they're twice as likely to marry someone white than black women are. So you've got like almost 400,000 couples where it's a black man and a white woman, and maybe like 200,000 where it's a black woman and a white man.
Okay. But yeah, just in terms of like how media kind of promotes violence.
There's actually, if you want to go, truthandreality.org, there is a woman who is doing amazing work kind of examining reality television and how it perpetrates this idea that violence against black women is acceptable. If you look at the Janae Rice video where Ray Rice, I don't know if you guys heard, but you know, with Ray, American football star, he was beating his woman. They looped that video so many times, so that people could constantly see this woman being knocked out. There was a trans woman, Anaya Parker, who was shot in the head. They kept looping that video over and over and over. There is this delight that some people take in seeing black women abused. It is a cultural thing, it is a societal thing. And so when we look at these reality shows, a lot of them are scripted to portray this narrative that black women deserve punishment, harsh treatment. You've got these men treating them like crap and things like that. And we call it ratchet TV, and people watch it and they consume it. It's my guilty pleasure. But in my opinion, there's nothing pleasurable about watching black women abused over and over and over and over again. And yet, at least in America, that is a point of entertainment. So I think that the connection there between the violence of what they're seeing, again, we've got teenagers. The CDC is finding that black teenagers, minors, are 80% more likely to be beaten on purpose by their boyfriends than white girls. Where are they getting that from? It's in the music, it's in the television, it is in the examples they're seeing in their homes and in their communities. And so it's like, what do we do, right? But the media, again, as black women are just not valued, then they're gonna continue to do that. If it makes money, they don't care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Next question. So there was a question over here, yes.
Hi. I'm very proud that you ladies are here, because you must have come from very strong women to be here today and putting your point across and to listen and to hear the positive things you have to say. I grew up in Jamaica, and my mother was a very strong black woman. She worked very hard. She didn't take any crap. And when my father stepped out of line, she put him in line. So I am a very strong person. And to ask a question, I just can't understand how men are beating black women, and they find that they have that power to do that. Is it because the women are not educating themselves or not putting themselves out to work to be independent, to stand on their own, to have power over themselves and look after themselves? How can women be allowed themselves to be controlled by men in this way? Because my mother didn't allow this. And I wouldn't allow it. I bought my girls and they wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
The abuse starts as children, though. I mean, the young girls are being taught from early on that this is how you're going to be treated. It's hard.
But how do we have that conversation, which you're saying? Because I'm sure what you're not saying is those girls should be beating those men. That's not what you're saying either. No, exactly.
No, I'm not saying the girls should be beating the men.
But you're also not. There's also what has changed.
I mean, I was getting a second master's degree
them,
when my
because the
ex-husband
fact
was
is
treating
we
me like
allow
shit.
things to happen.
Yeah, so it's not
to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is it because of education? Because we're not strong enough to stand on our own 2 feet and to say to these men, you don't control me, I control my life.
Can I say I'm a Jamaican? I was born in Jamaica and brought up there by a woman like you described in a family in which women were not beaten, yeah? But within Jamaica itself, there were women being beaten when I was growing up there, and there always have been. Because, you know, I mean, in a way, like Feminista was just saying to me at the side, it doesn't matter to an abusive man if you're doing your master's degree, if you've got a PhD, if you're the most beautiful woman in the world. If they want to beat you, they will beat you, and that's it.
And it's not a case of allowing it to happen either.
Exactly.
It's not allowing.
No, it's not that.
And I understand from the Jamaican culture, the men are vicious.
Well,
I don't think that's
wanna
quite.
say that.
I think men in all cultures can be
Yeah,
vicious.
yeah.
I think men of all cultures can be vicious. So then let's try and. I think men of all cultures can be vicious,
Well,
and
can I
some
just say
women.
one thing? Can I just,
but
because I
think
work in housing and homelessness, and I'm going to tell you one thing. The number one reason for women becoming homeless, at least in the United States, is domestic violence. So,
Here
and
as
it
well.
takes,
And that's across.
and that's
as well.
across, right?
Yeah.
And it takes an average of 7 times for a woman to leave an abusive man before she can. And then of women who are killed by domestic violence, 75% were because they left. So we have to kind of think of these things, okay? Women who are killed by domestic violence, 75% of them is after they left the man. So it's not so much about why aren't these women standing up to men or fighting back and things like that. It is because there is a culture that sustains and condones abuse against women. In the United States, it's only been 20 years that we've had legislation that actually said it was wrong to hit women. 20 years, and our country was
Or
formed
wrong
in
to rape
such
your wife.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for black
You know,
women, if you look at Mary Frances Berry, what she wrote about, until the late 50s, early 60s, it was not illegal to rape a black woman. So you have these laws and these that influence society and these cultural standards in which women want to assert themselves and they want to believe that they can do more. But when you leave, you have a 75% chance of getting killed. So it's a little bit deeper than that. That's a different conversation.
But
Yeah.
I
But
also,
I just want to make
can I
one
just say-
point
Kieran and
on
then
that.
Shirley.
Is that I think it's really important that when we're talking about social inequality issues, we remember the role of black women, because quite often when they have a platform to speak, it's talking about, sort of the issue of, beyond the beauty, it's talking about, aesthetic issues. But when we're talking about, especially in Britain, about the relationship of young black women in relationship in their relation to young black men, what we're seeing is that men are being targeted, they're being racially profiled, they're being stopped and searched on the street.
Yeah.
So when this is happening, when they're being told that, largely on the police, when they're with their girlfriends, they can be stopped and humiliated in the streets. What we're not hearing is how the young women are responding and feeling about that. So if they're left out of these conversations, the message that they're getting is that they don't have a great support system, they don't have support institutionally on the streets, they don't have perhaps, you know, support from the Metropolitan Police. So it's very difficult to then say, be really empowered, stand up for yourself and have a voice, when what you're seeing is your brothers, your, you know, the men in your life being humiliated and not supported by the police, and then it's very difficult to then say, why are you allowing yourself?
And then also to stand up, and then knowing full well that all of those institutions that you are supposed to stand up to it's already massively stacked against you. So it will be a white judge, it will be a white court, it may well be a white police officer. Exactly. So both of those elements of you will be attacked. Okay, so we're going to go to the next point.
Can I
Yes.
just say
Oh,
one
Shirley,
thing?
quickly. Yes.
Just quickly something about domestic violence. Just so in case you don't know, you know, women's refuges across the country are being closed down. There's been a massive reduction in funding for them. So if there's anything that you can do locally to fight against that, you need to do it.
And, you know,
That's
it's an
all.
election
Thank you.
year. It's an election year. Now we've got a chance to make things kind of different. You can write to your MP, you can badger them. You can, out of interest, while I'm here, how many people have registered to vote? Good. How many haven't yet? Okay. And so it's great that you've registered to vote, but also then go vote. Because black women are the least likely character. It's something like 20% less likely than white women and white men to vote.
Really?
Yeah, in this country. Yeah,
and
yeah,
in America, 92% of registered black women vote. We swing all the votes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so
yeah.
weird.
It's really, It's really. I've
We
been doing
swing
some
the
digging into
votes,
figures, so
yeah.
it's really, you know,
Vote.
and all it takes is some annoying, pestering emails to your local MP, or if you get that knock on the door during EastEnders or whatever, just be like, what are you doing about women's refuges?
Yeah.
It's really simple this year. Okay, so next point. Yes.
Hi, my name's Nicola. I have two children, a 7-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. And I think when I became a parent, it became more apparent to me that the media did not portray the image of black women and black people in general in the sense that I recognised it. So I think as a responsible parent, I've taken it upon myself to provide them role models. So I think it's a bit... I don't think that you can sit and wait for the establishment to change. So therefore, I educate and give positive role models to my children to the fact that you've seen mummy and daddy achieve. You can do whatever you want to do. You just need to work a damned harder, perhaps in the next white person, but just get on with it. And I think constantly being negative and saying, the world owes you a favour, it's not going to progress the kids. It's just going to make them more bitter. And I think we need to give them the positivity. And also in terms of art, there must be a reason why black people are not coming to these types of things, to be more educated about culture.
That's a good point.
There's a
Do we
reason.
support ourselves enough?
No.
Do we support black artists? Do we support black designers?
I think I went to something in London the other day. I went to an event and there was a poet there, and she spoke about the fact that only one black person can get through.
Right.
And I was like, what? No, I'm not having that. Like that can't be right. It's not right. And I think there's different types of art. Black people do go to the theatre and watch things, but maybe they wouldn't necessarily. Not all of them are going to want to come and see the work that I'm making. So I think, and I guess, I think it. Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
I think there are networks out there. There's lots of things. There's opportunities. There are things happening. But it's the same thing with like the voting. And I went to watch D'Angelo the other day. I was surprised by the audience. I was in London. I was like, it's going to be a full black audience. It wasn't. Maybe they don't want to pay their money to go and see things. They should. I don't know how you encourage audiences to go and watch things, or black people to come out of the house and go and do things. It's.
I mean, there's deep things about it's about programming. It's about reach. It's about all those. But just bringing it back to the body, really. Yes. Just when you're doing your questions, if we can just kind of stick, otherwise we're going to be. It's going to be tricky.
When you're
But
talking about support in terms of the body, like everything I have on except for my shoes was made by a black woman, and I'm sorry.
In case you can't see, what does your T-shirt say?
Black girls are magic, and it's something that I affirm. But I say that not to try to like stand out, but I have this theory and this credo that I live by. Anything I need or want to get done, any service or product I need, I can find a black woman who makes it. And so I go out of my way to do that. And sometimes it's about, we rely on convenience and what's local and what's close or whatever. And sometimes you have to put in that effort to support that. But when I present my body and myself, I want to do so in a way that is empowering other women. So this skirt, this top, these earrings, everything made by Black women. And so I've put money in their pockets, and then I'm a physical representation of that. And then people will come and they will say, where did you get that? Would you do it? Aesthetically, they'll ask me questions, and I can direct more business towards them. So that's kind of important to me in terms of that,
Yeah.
So that's something that we can do.
And also we need to be putting pressure, as the collective pressure on editors who are doing listings, who are doing events calendars, who are doing all of those things in the media to say, okay, this is an event that's happening, this is a minority event that's happening, this is being championed by women of colour, can we see this? Because quite often, a lot of my experiences have been working on broadsheets where when we're doing listings, they're like, okay, well, we have those kind of events covered already, we already have two.
Or we did one last week.
Yeah, we did one last week, exactly. So there's a quota that's already been filled. Yeah. And so if we're making the case that actually this is worthy of being here, this is what we want to see, this is what you should be representing, why aren't we seeing that in Time Out? Why aren't we seeing that, across The Guardian? Why aren't we seeing that more and more? Maybe it's because we're not pushing hard enough, and that's something that we should do and something we could take away.
I just want to move on a little bit, start talking about stereotypes and stereotypes in terms of images of Black women, in terms of our bodies, in terms of our psyche. Kieran, can you just say a few words really about stereotypes that you face?
I think that working in white-dominated spaces, it's much easier, I think, to, when you're writing, to make things very digestible to an audience who you assume might not understand the difference across the board of how minority bodies look and how they work, and the issues maybe facing, Black women's hair issues, how political that is, Indian women wearing blue contacts, or, across the board, Latina women slicking down their baby hairs, and how that's been appropriated and what those issues are. So quite often my first-hand experience has been that, there are certain stereotypes that work, that people understand, so let's not confuse the issue too much and step outside of that and then start having too much detail. We understand braids. We don't need to start talking about box braids or cornrows or all those kind of things, because that's confusing. Our audience won't understand that. So it almost seems like it's easier, because that's what our audience understand. It's easier to conform to the tropes that already exist. So I think that my first-hand experience has seen that as been constantly trying to push the idea that not all women are angry Black, it's hypersexualized, existing in the fashion pages, dressed in tribal wear, we all know what we're talking about, those fashion pieces where, we have these sort of jungle cat females. Yeah. And I think that it's about making those changes. It's about being in a newsroom and saying, that there isn't diversity. So what's really important is that we're challenging that constantly and saying things like, big bums are really sexy, but there's so much other sexy stuff that's happening with the way that Black women look, the way that women across many ethnicities look, and always challenging the idea that it's much easier to conform to specific stereotypes. And I think that is something that happens. I'm not sure what your experience has been like as a journalist in similar kind of spaces, but I think that you've done a lot of really great work, especially with your work at The Guardian, to kind of open up those discussions, and it's about taking that further and further each time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Yes, I have a question here, and then there.
Hi, my question's about stereotypes and form. I'm originally from the East Midlands. I'm from Northampton, and I'm from a big family, a third generation, and I decided that I wanted to move to London because I didn't want to be part of the good girl stereotype, that I'm from a good family, the women are very pretty and we're looked after by our men, i.e. my uncles, you can't talk to anybody, or my brothers, and there's that element of it. And I've moved to London, and I'm a fundraiser, and I work at a national institution, and I feel now I'm fulfilling another stereotype, whereas I'm really conscious of what I wear. I don't want to be seen as being aggressive. I'm very conscious over this story that I am telling with my body. And an example is I came here on Friday to a concert with my friend, and my boss was like, "Oh, when you get home, you're going to change into your colourful clothes."
Wow.
Because the assumption is that there's a constant management of my body. I feel like I have to manage it all the time, whether I haven't got a big bum, but I've got big boobs, and everything has to be proportioned. So I'm not sexualized because I don't work in the creative side. I'm a fundraiser. So I want to be taken seriously, and there's that management of it constantly. So I just wanted to hear your opinion.
Great, thank you very much. Great contribution. Rachael, obviously you're an artist, so you have a certain level of freedom and of expression.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're probably also bumping up against some of these similar ideas.
I think I sometimes think about how I would fit in the corporate world. I'm also a teacher as well, and I question how I might be able to go into a school looking the way that I do. I guess whenever I'm likened to another black female, it's always Serena Williams. I'm Serena Williams around the globe. Because I guess my physique is it's quite athletic, apart from the stomach, but anyway, it's a thing. And I don't know how I necessarily feel about that. I totally get where you're coming from in terms of like always feeling like I have to be a different person depending on where I am. I'm trying very much now to just be the same Rachael everywhere I am, because I don't feel that I should have to change to suit other people. And don't we all want to move to London? I mean, yeah, I'd love to. It's so expensive there.
I think it's...
Say really quickly, I actually don't take any job where I can't dress the way I want to. So when you're talking about the corporate thing, like... No, what I'm saying... So my point is that I chose a career and went into a career path, and I chose the positions that I've had specifically after asking what's the dress code, because I refuse to go to work every day feeling like I'm putting on a particular show. I'm like, this is who I am, this is how I am. Same thing with women who have natural textured hair, who slick it back for interviews. I've never done that, and I understand why some women do, but for me, I absolutely refuse to not wear an afro at a job interview or to not do these things, because if I'm going to be discriminated against, I do not want that job. And I understand that there's a certain level of privilege there, because not every woman has the ability to say, I can do that because they need the money and they need to do that. But I know for me, just on a personal level, it has been very important that I've been able to present myself exactly the way that I want at any time and any place in any situation, and trying to work with other women, because I feel like if we all collectively did that, they gonna not hire all of us? I mean,
there's two or possibly three things there. Firstly, it's been nearly an hour, and we've only just mentioned and we've only just mentioned hair. Yeah, that's quite impressive. Secondly, I mean, I can read. The issue of choice and employment is obviously huge. As someone who was in the kind of so I was at the Guardian for a really long time. I've been writing about race. I've been writing about hair. I've been writing about all of these things for a really long time, and yet there are times when I'm going to certain meetings when I question, when I go, here we go again. I know I'm going to be the only black woman in the room. I'm probably going to be the only woman. I did a thing like last year at the UN. The clue's in the name, like United Nations. I should be able to have my hair how I want it, but I still was like, maybe I'll just get a blow dry. Those things are tough, and they're constantly tough. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that they're constantly tough, instead of being like, I've fixed it, I'm cool. So I think it is really difficult. I also think it's really interesting actually listening to you speak, because I do wonder how different it is firstly in the UK, and then within the UK, different spaces as well. So while it might be okay if I worked in a bank, in a corporate space, now in London to go in with my hair like this, it might not be okay if that bank is in Nottingham or is in Huddersfield or wherever. So I think there are lots of differences within that we need to think about actually, which is really yes.
A friend of mine has recently moved to London, and she wanted to shave her hair off for ages. And she said she worked at TNT, and she said, when I get a new job and I move to London, I'll cut my hair off. I can't be doing with going into work and getting all the questions about what have you done to your hair? So she moved, and actually. No, she didn't. She chopped off her hair. She went for a job, she didn't get it, but she thought, heck, I'm going to chop it off anyway. So she chopped off her hair before she made the move. She now lives in London. But that was like a big thing, that having to question. And you do, because you're going to get 21,000 questions about it.
When I shave my hair off, my dad told me I was never going to get a fucking job. Like, he was
Because
convinced,
the politicizing of hair, just
Yeah.
across the board for women. I mean,
Yeah.
for white women, I've noticed that it's if you want to be taken more seriously, you have to have it shorter and look more masculine, and you have to move from skirts to pantsuits. But then for black women, it's like you have to have it look more like white women's hair, and if you want to be accepted, and that's like it's the policing of the body. Like it frustrates me to no end that this is still the hair that grows out of my head is a political issue. I'm like,
and then it's in its own.
like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and in its natural state, the
Should not be.
we've done a session twice here at WOW on the politics of Afro hair,
ridiculous.
and the first one is still, I think the last time I checked it was 80,000 views because it's still a thing, it's still an issue. Okay, we've got to take this question here.
Thank you. I was very interested in what you said about mixed race and shadism and so on. And I think we're in danger of still defining ourselves according to how acceptable we are to white stereotypes and norms. I was born in 1953 in Battersea in an all-white family. I didn't meet my father until I was 37, my Ghanaian father. So I was other inside my own family. I was the only black woman I ever saw anywhere. There was nobody on the television. There was nobody when I stepped out of the room. And I was very definitely black. There was no such thing as mixed race. My skin colour was compared with dog shit, and my texture of my hair was fuzzy wuzzy, and I was completely other. And now I wear a Western suit, which I got made in Ghana in African cloth, and I got 10 of them, and I wear them all the time, because that is who I am. And I think we are still in this room constantly comparing ourselves to whether if we're too black or not black enough. I think we actually have to define ourselves, because the whole point about black women's bodies it's political, and we're all part of one political movement, and that's a movement for liberation. So I don't think we need to be making these divisions between each other.
Thank you. Just behind. Yeah.
Thank you. I just had a question about, or wanted to get your views about, where we get the most pressures about what we should look like. Is it mainly from other black women that is the strongest influence, or we get the most criticism, whether it's our natural hair, and some people feel that, don't let them know that our hair looks like that, why don't you straighten it? Or is it, sometimes I feel that we put the emphasis on, white people make us feel like this and so on, but a lot of the people that are voicing this a lot comes from the black community. And I just wanted to know what your views were on that, just the panel.
It's survival.
Survival.
It's survival. I think respectability politics are rooted in survival. I think as you had to be a certain way to not get killed, to not get beaten, to not be getting this, to get jobs. Like I said, some women have to straighten their hair in order to get a job. It's survival, right? And I think it's passed on. I think it's protective. I think particularly as black mothers that tell their daughters, don't dress like that. It's a fear of, if you dress like that, someone's gonna attack you. And we, unfortunately, it becomes a, we're punishing our daughters for this, and we're coming off in that way. But I think that it is, in my opinion, I think it's deeply rooted in survival. I don't want a man to rape you. And I know that there's these men out here, so what can I do to protect you? Not realizing that it has nothing to do with what you wear. I'm thinking as a mom, I might be able to protect you if I get you to wear a longer skirt, that kind of thing. And so that mentality gets passed on, that I have to be this way, or I have to do my hair a certain way, or I have to present my body in certain ways to survive, and think it ends up spreading. I don't know. That's just one of the things, and I do that to let us off the hook a bit, because I think what you were saying is like, we're moving away from blaming white people and kind of looking at ourselves, but still, it's why do we do that? And I think it's a function of white supremacy and white patriarchal supremacy that we continue to teach ourselves and pass these things on as methods of survival. So, I mean, that's just my thought about that.
Also, I work with a lot of young black female teenagers. As I work at a magazine in Brixton called Live Magazine as a journalism mentor. And two really strong things have come out of that, which I think relate quite well to your point.
which is one, for such a long time there has been, because of the way that the African diaspora has worked in this country and the way that British people responded to that, there's been one monocultural black identity. So within that, there hasn't been room to talk about Jamaicans, Africans, Ghanaians, Nigerians, Congolese people. It's you're black. So there's one look and there's one idea that was one aesthetic that you should conform to. So it's very difficult to try and find what you're supposed to look like within your community, because for a long time your community hasn't been represented,
and that was very much a numbers thing, almost the opposite of the States. So there was, certainly in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, it was about numbers. There weren't enough of us for us to be able to be separate and different.
But I think
that's changing.
Now.
And also, again, the numbers have changed. The 2011 census, the last census, was the first census that showed the majority non-white population in this country has switched from being majority Caribbean to majority African.
Yeah.
And that's a significant change, actually. But sorry, Karen.
Yeah, and you're right. And so, but before then, our role models, what young people are doing, they're looking at, okay, if I'm in Parliament, how does Diane Abbott have her hair? Because there's so few kind of visible role models of how we're supposed to look. You might go to The Guardian and go, how does Hannah have her hair? How does Diana have her hair? How do all these women have hair? Because that's what I should be emulating, because there's not enough diversity and visibility for me to think that I can step outside of that. And I think that has been a real issue, and that is really changing. And I think that the most exciting change with that frontier is happening with like young people in those conversations saying, actually, I don't care. I'm not just a black woman. I'm from Ghana. This is how we wear our hair. This is why I look like this, and this is why I'm making those decisions. So that kind of influence from your own community is becoming a lot stronger, and the voice is getting louder, and that's really exciting.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi. I don't think it's on. After all that.
Thank you. Just to bring it back a little bit to the ideas of the body, I just wanted to ask a question based on the whole idea of the Sable Saffron and Sarah Bartman trope. Due to fashion ideals, back in the 19th century, Charles Worth was an English designer working in Paris. He's been charged with developing the bustle. And I just wanted to, obviously that's the fashion, the historical fashion idea of, or possibly the idea of taking something that's been traditionally an African female aesthetic. And I just wanted to ask if the panel could speak something about the appropriation of black female bodies, considering, we have the whole thing about Vogue with this is the year of the bottom and, and all this type of thing, when actually you have in the news and in popular media more images of Kim Kardashian and white females and that with bigger bottoms. So I just wondered if the panel could speak something about the appropriation of black female bodies by the white Western media.
Okay, great, thank you. Rachael, do you want to start?
I always get to start, don't I, when it's a tricky one. Yeah, I mean, you can't not open a magazine these days. And I remember being younger and my bottom being a thing. I don't have big breasts, but I had a substantial bottom when I was younger, and that would be the black girl thing. Now it's totally not. Nor I'm going back to hair again. I am a little bit hair obsessed, but I feel it's always part of my body. The braids thing, that's gone. I don't feel like there's the lips. There's very few things left that are ours and just ours and are that can be celebrated as black female traits, because anything we can do, white women are also doing. So,
but it's complicated, isn't it? Because again, I was bullied to hell and back because of my bottom and my hair, but the bottom was a big thing. And I remember being, I don't know, maybe 18 and reading Jackie Kay's poem called The Black Bottom. And so I spent years and years and years being kind of paranoid and then about my bottom, and then it's switching to suddenly starting to feel actually quite proud of it, to then going, actually, I'm proud of this, thank you. To then Kim Kardashian, to now I'm just really confused. Yeah. So Shirley, deconstruct it for us.
It's interesting that you make those two comparisons, because that's very much about the commodification of black women's bottoms with the bustle, riffing on Sarah Bartman. And Kim Kardashian is also really interesting. Have you seen two things. She was on the cover of Closer magazine. I think it was Closer. I read Closer in the supermarket when I'm waiting in the queue, right? And on it said, Kim grows her bottom for the wedding. I found that really interesting. Kim grows her bottom for the wedding because she wants to be the curviest person at her wedding, right? So she's competing with Beyonce and everyone else that's going to be there. There was nothing said about how she's grown it, right? Because they showed the before picture, 3 months before, and then the after picture, and you think to yourself, 3 months and her bottom has become substantially larger. So that therefore points to enhancement, surgical enhancement, right? You can't get so much body fat back there in 3 months. And, you can do any amount of, rare leg lifts that you like, it still won't do it. So they never talked about that. They never talked about surgical enhancement as the way in which she's got that particular bottom. But switch now to Claudia Aderotini. Do you remember the young woman from London, the black young woman who went to Philadelphia to have her bottom enhanced? And that's a whole newspaper article.
Philly of all places.
Yeah, to a hotel room. She died there.
The poorest large city. Oh my God.
Yeah, she died there. Yeah. Okay. And that made the front, I think it was the mirror. I was in my barber shop and it was the front of the mirror and it was the front of the sun, you know what I mean? That made the front because it was like, why does this black woman want to get a bigger bottom? She wanted to do it for her hip hop career. She'd been, refused at some auditions, right? Now let's then go also to Nicki Minaj, one of my favorites. I love Nicki because she's some, and also Little Kim did the same too. But Black Barbies, right? Black Barbies. They tell you I spent the money to get this ass, right? This is me showing you that I've got money. I've got cultural capital, I've got the bling everywhere else. I'm going to put it here too, basically, right? So that is the position of the black woman's body in terms of the bottom today. Having what I call in my book, I actually call this the Uber bottom. The Uber Bati, nothing is kind of wrong with that anymore.
Can someone start a hashtag for that?
Nothing is wrong with the Uber Bati anymore, right? It's really fine.
So here's what's happening in America.
But then I'm confused and a bit anxious.
Yes.
When you talk about that.
Get that.
No.
Here's what's happening in America, though. Here's my thought about what happens in America.
Because I think it's it's so complicated. So it's not that I can't. It's not that I can't get it. It's that it's one thing for me to want it.
Yeah.
But then if I want it, what does that do? If I want it, I get it and I want it, and then I walk down the street and then I get harassed.
But look, here's what happened in
So
America.
whose quote unquote fault is that?
Yeah.
It's their
So then I know,
fault.
but it's difficult.
But again, you're being punished for not being
Absolutely.
white because white women are being celebrated. So in America, our diet changed. Everybody's fat. Everyone is fat in America now. And in my opinion, that shifted the appreciation of larger bottoms because white women had to adjust because they're all fat. We eat ridiculous. I mean, I'm a fat woman. I say I'm a fat woman. I don't give a fuck. I'm fat. But white women are not supposed to be fat. No, and now that white women are fat with these huge asses that white men have always hated. White men have always hated large asses. They like the big breasts. When they wanted big breasts, white women went and got bigger boobs. Now it's like, okay, we all have fat asses. How can we turn this into something that's popular and acceptable and trendy? Yeah, Black and Latino women have had big butts for whatever, but now that we got it, we have to make it acceptable. So I think for us, we're seeing that. And then what you end up seeing are Black and Latino men who are saying things to abuse us again, saying, well, now that white women have big butts, we don't need you. This is what we're seeing across social media, in videos. We went from black women being in music videos to now racially ambiguous women with large asses being in videos. We have moved away from appreciating, and it's like you guys are laughing, but there are black men who are basically telling black women they're not worth anything now that white women have big butts, because that's all they were waiting for. They were just waiting for white women to get big asses, and now that the white women have big asses, they don't need us
Kim Kardashian?
anymore.
Is that
Kim Kardashian doesn't count because, in my opinion, Kim Kardashian, her ass is fake, And she is, at one point, was her people were not considered white.
Yeah, that's
so
I
that's
agree.
the other thing that's a little
I
bit
agree.
different.
Yeah.
But then you see someone like Miley Cyrus who's like, oh yeah, I'm twerking. I'm like, but what are you twerking, man? 'Cause there's nothing there. And it's okay. And it's okay that there's nothing there. But I know at least for our country, it's because everybody has gotten fatter. And it's a way of adjusting to accept our fatness as being something that is culturally acceptable for white women.
But it's
right?
not just a big butt though, it's a very specific kind
It's
of
a
big butt.
it's like me, it's me. And I've dealt with this since I was a kid. I looked like this at age 12. This exact body I had at age 12. And so I have dealt with the sexual harassment that comes with having this big, these hips and this narrow waist that I can do like this, but also having these hips. This has been the bane of my existence as a woman, as a girl coming along. And now, as you said, the people are celebrating it. But growing up, this was what had me going home in tears every night. And then when I was sexually assaulted, I was blamed because you shouldn't have looked that good. So our bodies have been used against us. But let me just, one more thing. You know what I don't see in the United States? White women wearing African prints. I noticed that here. I thought that was very interesting when I came here. I see a lot of white women wearing geles and African prints and things. You don't see that in the United States. They won't go that far. They'll want the ass, they'll want the lips. They'll want the ass and they want the lips, but they're not going to wear the prints. I thought that was very interesting.
I just want more point on that.
Yes, Kieran.
Just around that issue of policing and how an aesthetic gets more and more policed and more difficult to inhabit is that, I spend a lot of time on World Star Hip Hop. I don't know if you guys do, and they have Vine compilations at the end of the week, and a lot of it is about like twerking. So it's this hypersexual way that you're not only have you got a big bum, but it's the way that you're using it. So are you using it in the most sexy way? Are you making it clap? Are you making it jiggle? Are you making it clap in time to a hip hop beat? So it's not even like now. If you've got a big bum, you're sexy. It's like, no, you have a big bum, but how are you using it? And what are you doing with it? And what are you doing to make it as sexy as you possibly can for a young audience, a growing audience of young men who are seeing that and realizing that actually for black women, just to inhabit something isn't enough. You have to use it and go the extra mile.
Can I just say one last thing about Kim Kardashian? I was watching her husband, Kanye West, on, I think it's called The Breakfast Club. And he was talking about his wife's bottom. And the way he talked about it, it was like it was a natural development. His wife's, his wife's got this body and his daughter's going to have this body too. So therefore he's got to ensure that the future is not going to be about his daughter being reviled for her bottom, because she's going to have that shape too, maybe from surgery, I don't know. So it's
and Photoshop. There's probably quite a lot of Photoshop as well that goes into it.
I
was concerned about him talking about his daughter's butt like that.
Yeah,
so
me
soon.
too.
I was like, that's a little creepy for me.
Me too. That was
okay,
weird.
next question. One and then two.
I hope I'm not going off topic here, but you've kind of touched on what I wanted to ask actually, and it's about colorism, and in my opinion, especially on social networks and social media, there's an epidemic, particularly with black men and their obsession with devaluing and trash talking darker skinned women, and it's insane. It's out of this world. If you're on social media and it's just every single day, it's constant, and it's even gotten to the point where they're kind of fetishizing racially ambiguous children, and it's kind of creepy. I don't know exactly where it's coming from or where it stems from, but it's at the present moment really, really insane. And my question really is, how do we combat that? How do we, I speak for myself here as a darker skinned black woman, how do I deal with that? And how do I've recently become responsible for my teenage brother, and I'm responsible for his education and his peers and that kind of thing. And how do I combat that? How do I help him because he's dealing with that, he's faced with that, he's part of it, and I hate to say that, but he is. How do I deal with the unlearning? Because I've done quite a lot of unlearning for myself and for my own benefit, and sometimes I hope that he's listening when I'm going on my feminist rants and I'm going on my old pro-black rants. I hope he's listening, but I want to know from maybe the panel could answer, like, how do we go about educating particularly young black men or men of colour that this is a real problem, and you don't just have to see it from a perspective that your sister's black and dark skinned, so maybe you shouldn't trash talk them all the time, but do it in secret with your friends when you're kind of fawning over this picture of Kim Kardashian.
Is colorism an unspoken thing within the communities?
It's not unspoken.
I don't
That's
know unspoken.
No, as in acknowledged. Is it acknowledged?
Oh, I think they do, and I think they don't care. They
Right.
get it. I think they do. I think older folks maybe, but like my dad, for example, prefers lighter skinned women, which is why I have this color. But I think the younger ones, I think they're more aware of it, and they're okay with it.
So then how do we challenge it? Rachel?
Well, I don't think it's the media, for sure, because that just perpetuates the whole thing. I don't see very many dark-skinned women in anything that I look at. I think it goes back to what somebody said over here about the education. It's about putting those images in your home. That is the only way you're going to do it. Absolutely. I mean, every single black man in my whole entire family dates white women. Every single one of them. It hurts me. It does. I'm like, what? You look at my dark skin and that's not attractive to you? I don't know what you can do. There's a mural on a wall in Nottingham, and it's a black woman. I wish I had a picture to show you, but her features are black. There was this whole rant about how she's not black, she's racially ambiguous. I was like, no, she's not. That is an African woman's face right up there, but we can't even have that. We can't have that. My little sister spoke to our other sister, who's the one younger than me, and they were talking about what do boys like? What do boys like in Nottingham? They like mixed race, but not black, white, like other mixes. Other mix. Like you have to, that stuff has to start at home now. We can't look to the media. We can't, those conversations about, celebrating dark skin need to happen. Yeah, needs to happen.
Okay, so here.
Hi there, my name is Jenna. I would just firstly like to thank Feminista Jones for being on Twitter and for being online and for, as a white woman, opening my eyes, actually blowing my mind most often than not, in regards to women of colour internationally and kind of their perspectives and what they deal with on a daily basis. I would really like to give you a big high five for that. You're amazing. What I would also like to ask the panel is, I understand and accept that it is not people of colour's responsibility to educate white people on how they can be better in the world. And I accept that I am a beneficiary of white supremacy as a white woman in the world. But what I would like to ask is what we can do to help deconstruct it and what we need to do on a daily basis to get there.
Okay, so white women as allies, discuss.
So I don't believe in allies.
Oh, you don't believe in allies? Oh, great. Tell us why.
Because if you look at the definition of allies and that kind of thing, it's about a mutual benefit. And you already have all the benefits, so what do I need to be working to get you some kind of mutual benefit? It's really about what's supporting me and what's helping me, right? You know what I mean? Like, I think I really take that approach. People hate when I say that. How could I be a good ally? I was like, you just be a good person. And being a good person is what you're educating yourself on how to be, because if you are a good person, then you are accepting of everyone's humanity. So it's not about, I don't have to ally with you. I don't have to be an ally, but I can just be a good person and trying to raise my children. And when I'm in these conversations over Thanksgiving dinner or whatever you guys celebrate, I don't know, because we have Thanksgiving. But when I'm having these conversations with my family and somebody makes an off-color joke and I'm, wait, what are you saying? That's wrong, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And we're talking about the children and how do you help? Being intentional. Now, my son is a lighter-skinned black boy, but when he was little and we'd be on the train, I'd see a little dark girl. I said, don't you think she's pretty? And he would say, yeah. And because mommy's telling him that this little black girl is pretty. And so now he's like 8, and this little girl that's writing him love notes, she's the darkest girl in the class. And he's like, mommy, she's so beautiful. Well, you don't know anything about beauty, but at least because when he was younger, I was being intentional. So I think as a white mother and raising, or a white woman, and if you have children or what have you, whatever you're doing, and all of you, it's really about being intentional and showing the image. You said, putting the images in the household and saying, this is taking your children to see Beyond the Lights or to see Belle instead of relying on the standard, romantic comedies. Really being intentional about the imagery and kind of shaping your children's view and saying, this girl is just as beautiful as this one.
I just want to say, to add to that, I really agree with everything you've just said. But I think what's also really important is for white people to remember and acknowledge that there's something called white privilege and white power, and that operates at like many different levels, from the aesthetic to the academic, to the workplace, to the walking down the street. and saying, hi, how are you? To going across the street to your black neighbor and saying, hi, I'm called Caroline, I'm from across the street. My family is this, and this. You know, introduce yourself to people. It's just about ordinary, everyday civilities so very often that children learn who to disdain and who to like, who's like them and who's not. It's really important.
And also just, this feels like a good opportunity to say, as Indian woman who's not black, I think that in terms of how we can help, the way that I've definitely done that is by being in spaces where, the whole kind of Indian invisibility is a completely different story that we can maybe talk about after. But, the point is for, young black girls who were interns on work experiences, they didn't see anybody. If there was no black women in the space, they felt like they could see me and speak to me about their experiences, and I would never purport to talk about that from someone who's experienced the same thing firsthand. So it's about being open, and I think, having solidarity, saying this is your experience, this is something that you should talk about, and I want to give you an avenue and a platform to discuss that. So whenever I'm talking, whenever I'm in those spaces, I say, you guys should be able to have a voice about this. You guys, and that's what my role is, to kind of bring you into those spaces and to help and to help you tell stories, because a lot of people do need help telling those stories, even if it's just about access. And as someone who's had a lot of difficulty with accessing those kinds of areas, I understand it. So I think it's not about saying, I understand what you've done firsthand, and I understand how you feel, because you don't, and we don't, and I don't. But it's about saying, coming from a position of some kind of minority, you might be in a minority in this room, even if you're not in a newsroom. So it's about understanding and channeling that and saying, how can I use that experience to try and amplify your voice? That's what I think.
Yes.
I just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on what you think about sort of asking questions, answering questions rather, as a black person. Simply because I work in Parliament, I work for an MP. And in the first week that I started, I think in my actual, where I am, there's one other black lady, and I have relaxed hair, she has natural hair. And I had one question, which was, how do you get your hair straight? Now, I just answered it quite happily. And when I sort of told another friend about it, they were just a bit upset, like, why would they ask that? Like, what does that mean? What kind of question is that? But, and then also on the flip side, I'm African, I'm from Nigeria, and I do get questions like, oh, but where is your bum? It's missing, because I don't really have a big bum. But I don't have itty bitty waist, but I've got a bit of chest, but that's it. But it's a very sort of like, you don't look like a standard black woman. People a lot of the time think I'm Caribbean. So it's just about when you answer sort of certain questions that you might get from non-blacks, and it's not just white people, it can be anyone who just doesn't understand the culture. Should there be a certain level of upset or anger, or is it just something you should just answer happily and willingly, just as sort of like they want knowledge, so why not?
It's your level is your level on that day, in that moment, by that person. But for me, a lot of it is about context and power. So it's who's asking. If you're asking me, if you can touch my hair and your hand is already in my hair, I'm going to be angry. And if you're also my boss, I'm going to feel a whole lot of other stuff, because it's about power. On another day, you might ask me, and I might be like, because do you know what? Some days I go into the office and my hair has grown like a foot. So I'm like, okay, I'm probably, but I'm still, if some person like, oh, yeah, did you? I'm like, don't ask me about my hair. And other days I'm like, oh, I think it's about context and power. So there's no kind of, if you say, on that day when they asked you about your hair, if that felt okay, it's not that you're failing to not be angry. But if every time you go in, and for me the whole issue is that it's the questioner is always the same type of person, and the person that's being asked is always the same type of person. Yeah. So I have never asked my white bosses, if I can touch their hair. Right? It would be weird. Yeah. It would be weird. Yeah. Right? So that's what makes it an issue.
I think for me as well, the question that makes me more upset is a question that comes from another black person, of my black politics, of me as a black feminist, of me as a black mother, of me as a black daughter, that kind of thing. That upsets me more. White people...
I expect it, right? I expect it. Like you choose what questions you want to answer, and that's my personal thing. Some people will ask me questions. I mean, all day long, like on Twitter or things like that. And even in my asking for them, they'll say, "Well, why didn't you answer my question?" Because I didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to. Because I don't have to jump to anybody's demand. I don't have to respond. But like she said, if you felt comfortable answering the question, then how are you wrong? You're not really wrong.
And also that whole notion of like that there is one black shape, there is one black face, there is one black nose, there is one black bottom. You know, that all comes from the stuff that you were talking about at the very beginning. I spent my whole life, often in the same moment, being told that I'm too black and not black enough. Like at the exact same time, one person is saying one thing on Twitter and somebody else is saying the other. So, you know,
also that it's not your responsibility to have to educate. You know, there's this idea that if you're a minority woman, what your role is to educate me. Like, where are you from? What does that mean? Like,
where are you from?
I don't mind.
Where are your parents from?
I don't mind being asked that. I only mind when what they want is a brief history of, you know, like, oh, and this is how we do this, and this is how we do this.
Yeah. What's your visa status? Is the actual question that
right. So to me, it's clear. It's you know, we have to engage with difference. You have to engage with difference whatever background you're from, and it's very clear when you haven't.
But the thing I was talking about before, I really agree with that. And the thing I was talking about before, for example, I'll give you an example from my experience of Jamaicans here saying to me, "But you don't sound like a Jamaican.
Oh, God.
You don't look like a Jamaican." And you just think, which Jamaican are you talking about, actually? Because seriously, brethren, we can't talk better than
That is a great point upon which to end the fabulous session. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel.